about a life in the harsh terrain. We learned to be creative to survive the everyday bleakness, to forage for sparse and strange plants that bore orange bitter fruit, to bear the twists of our cruel minds that woke us at 3 a.m. to the bloody cries of wolves, and to do the best we could to adjust the blackness of the cave. Over snail-like years, we came to explore the depths of our caves. We discovered broken stones around us, in the walls around us on the floor. Our very brokenness led us to delve into broken things around us. We yearned connection with ourselves, with others, with stones, with the world. Some of us started tunneling. A strange force kept us going and digging, exploring. We began excavating under the floors of the cave and unearthed more luminous and reflective objects. We could only go deeper. We began to polish the stones and were amazed to discover that the act of polishing changed their colour. They became reflective and we saw our own true faces for the first time in years. We glowed. Maybe there had been something wrong, not with us, but the world around us. Perhaps the banished had a story to tell. Maybe something we could share. Could the jewels be precious to others and not just us? If only the market dwellers would see what we had to bring, then everything might change. We set off from our caves with our carts rickety, not able to get far, the heaviness of our load almost unbearable. The horses we would tried to harness would not pull in the right direction, and there was no support from strangers. What kept us going, I'm still unsure. We did not know where we were going. The roads had changed. They seemed to loop around on each other. They're bumpy and led by treacherous ravines. And many times we almost gave up, falling into telling ourselves things would never change. And then one night we camped close to a river, and a few of us fell to telling our tales and shared them. And more of us came. It was like magic. I wish I knew the ending of this tale. A few of us have managed to set up stall, and a few of us have exchanged our jewels. It is not easy, but every time we meet, we feel stronger. The jewel merchants are journeying as we speak.
So here we are.
By the campfire, with your tales to tell, and where are we going really? I had 6 years going through quite a lot, understatement, of mental distress between the ages of 25 to 31. And when I recovered, I wanted to give back. I was angry, but also I could see good care when I saw it. I could walk into a psychiatric ward now and tell the culture of the ward from a few steps. I know what good and bad care looks like. I have a vision for what that might look like. I have insight, I have wisdom, I have things that you all have. I know very, very clearly the importance of relationships and working together, because I saw that as the quality of my healing as dependent on those relationships, because all other relationships were broken. My damage was trust, my trust was damaged even, and the identity I had was slowly being rebuilt. It was actually a very fragile time. And I thought, I want to go back to being an activist. I'd campaigned in the third world developing countries against the inequities of the pharmaceutical industry. I'd seen peer support and community development, and was quite inspired by barefoot doctor type work. I thought I could do that. Couldn't find anywhere to do it. I want to set up a self-help group for people with depression. Couldn't find the resources or the capacity or anyone who would fund me to do that. I write poetry. I wanted to do workshops. That was the way I wanted to give back. Couldn't do it. There was nothing to support me into that route. Instead, I went to fill out a questionnaire on my experience and whether I would recommend this psychiatric unit to my friends and family. An odd question for the NHS to ask. I began to go to focus groups where they gave me stale sandwiches on Tuesday nights when I'd actually prefer to be watching EastEnders or watching the football. Although I support Leeds United, I didn't actually always want to watch the football at that time. And I joined a local mental health charity and got suckered into being a chair of a local mind in North London. And I began to attend focus groups with my Mind t-shirt. And people would start asking me, so what do patients think? And I say, what, all of them? 250,000 people in Barnet, 1 in 4 have mental health problems, all of them? You want me to represent all of them? Yeah. We'd really want to know what patients think. So I'd tell my story. And half of them would fall asleep. Who does he think he is? Anecdote, usual suspect, axe to grind, not a great analogy for a mental health patient. And I began to realise that I needed data, I needed evidence, so I learned to wear a suit, which I've only just got out of the habit of doing over the years. And I came back with the data and the evidence, and those that thought I was telling it like it was at the committee table, they fell asleep. Because they said, oh no, he's gone native, he's been co-opted. It's an incredible catch-22 to be a representative. Either you know too little, or you know too much. Either way, you're marginalised and buffered from decision-making. And I learned over the years that this was the classic catch-22 that the NHS uses to buffer power. We collect, they, I'm a boundroid, I'm a sort of outsider, insider, as my friend Becky Malby put it. We, in the NHS, they, never know which side I'm on these days, the NHS collects data in two ways. Collects your views, harvests us, harnesses us, are the words we use, collects. In two ways. We get feedback, which is analogous to the parent-child relationship that I have with my psychiatrist. You tell us, and we'll read it, we'll interpret it through our professional lenses, and trust us, we'll do something with this. Thank you so much. Bye. That's child-parent. That's one traditional mode of discourse in the NHS, I believe. Two, you get a representative on a committee and you slot them into an institutionally defined project or purpose, either an improvement piece of work that has been defined already, or a piece of governance committee work, which, God help us, you know, those agendas that come a couple of days before the event with acronyms and glossaries if you're lucky. And you're fitted in, and if you tell your story, you become either angry or tamed at the table. And it becomes like an adolescent scrutiny fist thing. Have you been to those committee meetings where you're angry or they're angry, and it just doesn't go anywhere, and the psychiatrist goes away and says, I'm not doing engagement again. Oh, yeah. These people. A caricature, but we have two main methods of gathering feedback and doing engagement. One is feedback and one is representation and scrutiny. And I've had 30 years of involvement doing that sort of stuff, and I know it leads absolutely nowhere. And now we have crisis and opportunity. Now we have integration, now we have partnership, now we have collaboration. We know healthcare services are not fit for purpose. We know that. We all know that. But we still have an engagement industry that's not fit for purpose. And it's still about self-serving the system, rather than being built around people's lives and opportunities and value. Those jewels of wisdom we bring back from the caves of suffering. So how does that change? Well, meanwhile, I met somebody called Michael Sears. I don't know if any of you are on Twitter, follow him, MJ Sears. He was the 11th bowel transplant patient in this country, and he was lying on his bed and a shit was flowing out of him, literally. And the stoma bag was there, and he'd been in marketing a little bit, so we also bring things from our previous life, and people forget that. You know, we're people and professionals. Combined with that experience and insight is a powerful, powerful combination. So Michael asked a few patients, does this always happen? Oh yeah, you'll get used to it. He said, I'm not getting used to it. So he invented a Bluetooth sensor technology that looks at how his sensor, how the stoma bag fills up. And he's now producing that. But guess what? In the UK, they refused to license it, so he's had to go to America and open his factory. He runs a company called Health 11. And he's now saying, actually, I'm not going to import it into the UK because they're not an important market, because this country is so closed to outsider entrepreneurialism. And when I say our country, I'm talking about the UK, of course, Great Britain. I met Denise Stevens, who had MS, relapse-remitting MS, and she's a designer. And she started asking, why is my home looking like a hospital? And she created a user-led community, not many professionals, come to my world. she said. Come to my world, I'm not coming to yours. She created an online community, and the digital world gives us that opportunity now. And she's created a community, and she invents and designs with people a collaborative way of assisted design and assisted living. These are patient entrepreneurs who are using their past wisdom and their jewels from the caves of suffering to do something very different. And then there are people like me who are not very good at inventing things. We talk a lot and write a lot, and we do the smoke and mirrors stuff, and we actually like systems. We like getting our hands dirty in that world. There are people like Alison Cameron, who's a mental health activist. There are people like Anya Diayong, who's been leading self-management and education. There are people like Dominic Walker at Mind, who's leading a fantastic program of peer support in mental health. Working with the system. And we've discovered that what patient leader means, and this is the definition. I was walking along the road one day, and I've been talking to my colleague Mark Doughty, who has arthritis and been in education a long time. We've had a parallel journey. We're setting up the Centre for Patient Leadership. But before that, I was walking down the road, and I thought, wouldn't it be fun if I put two words together, like patient and leader, and put them together and just watch the mischief making around those contested words. Because I come from mental health services where we've reclaimed words like bonkers fest. And I've watched the gay movement reclaim the word queer. And I thought, you know what, we don't have a word, unfortunately we don't have a word like the Greens, which has a positive connotation. If we had a word or a colour or a something that described our experience of life-changing illness and our use of services, and our constructive approach to health. Wouldn't it be great if we had I don't know, is it maroon or purple? But the feminists have got that. I mean, it's not fair. We haven't got the words. And so we argue the semantics. So for me, a patient leader is somebody very precisely who's been affected by, could be a carer, could be a patient, been affected by life-changing illness, injury, or disability. So not just taking your kid to A&E. We're not all patients. Let's get that straight. So when doctors say we are all patients, no, we are not all patients. Some doctors are, and some doctors are not. We bring something different to citizens and community people involved in budget and resources decisions. We bring our experience from the caves of suffering, joined with our professional expertise. We are not right, we don't hold the truth, but we have a truth that should be brought to the table. So patient leaders are those with life-changing illness, injury, or disability who want to change stuff. In short, people who've been through stuff who want to change stuff. Really simple. We want to do it in partnership because we're sick and tired of fighting, because we all know we need to work together. Working together is the only way we're going to save this world, I think. So that's it. That's what patient leader is. And suddenly this job came along. How much time do I have? 10 minutes. Okay. I got towards the end. I was telling Annie that I usually spend too much time on a story leading up to this bit. So I'll tell a bit about my job in Sussex. So while I was working with Mark Doughty with the Centre for Patient Leadership, we trained about 1,500 patient leaders, representatives, people in Health Watch, patient participation groups and GPs. Mark peeled off and is now working at the King's Fund and doing some really interesting work around collaborative leadership. I became more interested in systems and power and went back to my old stuff of engagement and wanted to do it a different way. I was interested in the opportunities because I felt there was no point in training people for a dead end. If there aren't the senior opportunities for influence, people are going to get really pissed off. And so I saw an advert, which I wasn't originally going to go for, called Patient Director. And it was with a musculoskeletal service, so bones, muscles, joints. We were receiving referrals, screening them, running community clinics, very dedicated to shared decision making, wanted to do peer support, wanted to do a lot around self-management. And they were really committed to patient and public involvement. And in the room they had a GP called Steve Leitner who knew about me and Mark's work and said, well, if you really want to bring these things together, patient's experience, patient and public involvement. They're usually done in different silos. So usually the patient experience stuff is done by the nursing director. Clinical outcomes is done by the medical director. Self-management is run by an enthusiastic, low-paid nurse who just happens to be doing a bit of rehab and wants to take on that lonely pioneering job. And usually the PPI, dealing with those feisty voluntary groups, is done somewhere else, and I'm not even including what the local authority does, which in England duplicates a lot of this stuff. And he said, well, if you want to do that, why don't you flip it on its head? Why don't you put the patient director at the top to bring these things together? And why don't you actually have in the role description, the role specification, essential experience of being affected by life-changing illness, injury and disability, and the potential capacity to bring that to a strategic level. And I thought, I can't do that. You know when you've got this imposter syndrome, I can't possibly do that. And I got encouraged to apply, and I got the job. I know nothing about musculoskeletal service. I'm a mental health service user. Now that's interesting. So my job has become to broker the conversations that bring people together. So when anyone's starting an improvement project, say on pain services, I try to bring the pain services lead into the room with the admin staff, very important, and patient partners, as we call them, people like you. And they're not there to tell their story and make everyone cry and just give them a compassion rush, as Jocelyn Cornwall comes in. They stay in the room, and that's the key. That's the key. So people start off telling their story, start off having the conversation, and the dialogue flows. And so we've now got 8 patient partners, not many. We pay them £150 honorarium plus expenses. I've wangled a budget that soon might disappear. And that's a real issue, the budgets and the resources, and getting that budget line right into the program budget for the project manager, so it's not my central resource. And we've done lots of things with them, and what's really interesting about them is we're meeting on the 1st of November, and lo and behold, they've got a bit feisty. And they're saying to me, David, actually, you keep on slotting us in to the institutionally narrow opportunities. You're doing exactly what you said we do. We'll take the lead. I thought, I'm not sure I'm ready to let go. And so we're meeting on the 1st of November. We're going to talk about something that they want to do, because one of them wants to write blogs. One of them wants to help set up our databases to engage other people. We've got 200 patients who want to be involved, where we're going to sort of have a pool of people coming to the focus groups and doing the engagement. One of them wants to help with an access project. She's an architect. One of them's a teacher and has been training some of our staff in integration of physical and mental health and well-being. And they want to do a collective project. So next April, next March, we've got to do it in financial year for the CCG sequence. Do you have these rubbish things called sequence? Sorry, is this being recorded? You get more money. You get more money for doing development improvement work. It's like an incentive. Actually, now in England, you don't get the money taken away if you do it. It's been reframed beautifully by NHS England, bless them. And the point being is we've had people on those projects, and I've forgotten where I was going to go. I knew I shouldn't get distracted. You know when you slag people off, I always get distracted. I slag really uncentered.
Next March. Next March.
Oh, next March. Next March. When Leeds are just on the cusp of blowing the playoff places again. The point being that what they want to do, I hear, is run a patient-led summit on access issues. We've got a lot of emphasis on waiting times and targets, which I find perhaps a touch disproportionate because it's skewing our resources and admin problems. And actually we're losing sight, I believe, of some of the basics like waiting rooms, people waiting to be informed of delays, and walking. And obviously with the MSK condition, mobility and access and parking is huge issues. So we want to run a patient-led summit next March, so I'll tell you how that goes. And I want to end with 2 stories. Yeah, two things that for me nail it. Jenny, who was in one of our projects on admin systems, she was in a session around our admin systems. We have call handlers, and what we found was 70% of the calls we were getting were a waste of our time. We call them failure demand. Our own systems are generating the failure that people call us back. We give people appointments, which they then cancel. We slot them in, they don't have a follow-up, they phone up and complain. So there's this vicious cycle in our systems. And Jenny said, you know what, when I got offered an appointment, two things happened. Either you phoned me when I was in Tesco's, and I didn't have my diary, or you sent me a letter, and you know what, I can't do that. Why don't you give us power, interesting word, to phone you up and opt into an appointment at our convenience? And all the staff in the room, ooh, what about our DNAs, do not attends? What about these people? Do we really trust these people to phone and book their appointments? So we tried it with 100 people, with older people with hip and knee problems in Brighton. And we estimate that if we roll that out, as we're trying to do across the different pathways, we will save 3,500 cancelled appointments. Patient involvement is not just a nice to do. Yeah? It's going to save us money. The impacts it's going to have about reframing problems, bringing new solutions to the table, changing practice and policy, and sustaining improvement. The final thing it does is changes the dynamics. And let's go back to relationships. If this is about working together. So one of our GPs at a meeting said she noticed as we went around the table that Stan introduced himself. Well, I'm a patient, I've had 13 injections, I've done this, I've done that, and actually became quite naked, metaphorically, in the room, very vulnerable. And Zoe noticed as a GP, she said, I'm a GP with a special interest in MSK and I work at the Brighton and Hove Clinic. And suddenly they realised that the power imbalance is set up from the beginning. The humanity rule is there. But however, what she found was the patient partner gave her permission to be human, so she talked about herself. And suddenly the trust came back, because she talked about her own kids. So I think we give permission for clinical people and non-clinical staff to be human again. And I think that's what we bring from the wisdom of suffering. Just one very small one was that Stan then said, I used to distrust people if they were honest about waiting times because I knew it was going to be 6 months and I lost confidence in the system. But I can see, Jonathan, who was the pain lead at the time, that you don't have all the power to change the system which I thought you had. Now I know there's uncertainty in the system. Now I know you can share vulnerability, that it's not all great and you can take down that facade. I'm not going to sue you. I'm not going to complain. I'm going to work with you to make it better. And then the magic happens.